if you haven't signed in on the agenda, the attendees list, please feel free to, and add any additional items you want to talk about at the end of the agenda. Do we have a volunteer to take notes today?
I'll do it.
I will.
Sounds good. I guess, is it Natalie or Joe?
We'll pair
Joe,
on
if
it.
you, okay.
First thing on the list is release planning and updates. Starting with platform.
All right, sorry about that. Let's see, so PAC went into RC, or we released an RC yesterday. The anticipation is to get that rolling out for about a week. So that's next Wednesday, where we'll try to publish it. There might be, because I will be out of the office during that time, I might not be able to get to it until the following Monday. But somewhere around that time frame is when you should expect a PAC release.
We are still working on the life cycle. Hopefully the spec should be finalized soon, and we'll be in a place to release a release candidate after that.
Awesome. Any updates on distribution or learning teams or Buildpack author subteam?
Nothing for distribution. We cut that release yesterday. That was a fake release. Went well. Auto updated the registry index, so that was really cool.
Awesome.
We also cut a release for libcnb, which added like the Gates service bindings for runtime instead of using the Buildpacks form, and some minor patches and dependency updates.
Awesome. Any other updates? Then we'll move on to our weekly RFC review. Do we still do an RFC review in this? The item's still there, but I forget if we made a decision to.
We claimed we were moving it over to the public core team sync, and that we're going to talk about specific scheduled RFCs in the working group, but also at the core team sync, we did not do the RFC roundup or schedule things. So have not yet gotten in our new habits.
All right, then we will do this today. One second to share my screen. Can everybody see that? Sorry, let me fix my Zoom. All right. So first thing is skip over the ones that aren't RFCs. Those are just PRs, I think. First thing is officially supported utility build packs. Any updates on this, Joe? Need anything?
Yeah, I added some criteria for what criteria for accepting utility build packs to the project. So take a look at that when you get a chance. It's a little, it requires that the behavior be spec'd, which is something I think Sam brought up. So happy to go back and forth on that, but that was just a starting point.
Sounds great. Dynamic runtime base image selection is mine. I responded to a couple of the comments here. I'm not focusing on this one until the other two get through. I think there's a lot more interest in removing stacks and this kind of what we're going to do about stack packs compared to this one. So I'll kind of skip over this until we maybe a little more consensus on these two, unless anybody feels like they'd like to talk about that one more. Just kind of wanted to see if there's a lot of interest in that I'm not aware of. Cool. So support Docker files is the next one. I put this in the agenda. I made some big updates to this based on a bunch of feedback from yesterday, from some of the Red Hat folks. You know, we'll kind of talk about this when we get to it. Remove stacks and Nixons. I also responded to a bunch of feedback in there last night. I think this could be ready to go if everybody magically agrees. But please take a look if there's anything there that would worry you or that you want me to update or that you disagree with. I didn't put this one on the agenda just because I think most of the things we're adding examples and things like that, but I'm happy to talk about it more as part of the Docker file one if people would like to. Next one is, I don't think this one's an RFC, so this is remove shell specific logic. What can we do to get this?
Just real quick on the one that you skipped over. It's not an RFC, but I would like some, eyes on it so that we can merge that in.
Got it. Do you mind if I add approvers?
Sure.
I forget what.
Optional piece, yeah.
Oh, and me too. Awesome. And remove shell specific logic.
I think this is, I think I've addressed most of the issues here. It seems like the outstanding sticking point is the default build packs. The last thing that I'd like feedback on from people is there's a big discussion about signal handling at the bottom. And I've described why I think this actually doesn't affect signal handling, but some folks wanted this to be added to the RFC. So just let me know if you agree with my explanation or want changes there.
Awesome. Next thing is make build layers read only for subsequent build packs. Is this still active, or was there something around caching needed to happen for this too? No, this is. I think this is still good. Sam, do you have any updates?
I have not seen Emily's last comments. I think apart from that, I think that was it.
Cool.
We skipped over the SBOM one. I also made some updates to that, but I think I'll take a look at Emily's comments in the read only layers stuff.
All right, I totally missed that.
So there was a comment around backwards compatibility. I added an example on how we can preserve backwards compatibility with CycloneDX JSON format. So we can talk about it later if you want, but since CycloneDX does lose JSON schema validation and metadata is not an existing key in the components object, we can preserve the metadata table as it is, and all of the information is preserved. I only recommended moving name and version to the appropriate CycloneDX mappings. I believe we've done like both of these migrations in the past when we had name and version as top level keys and we moved them to metadata. So I think it would still be fine. So we should be able to have backwards compatibility with this.
Awesome. Do you want to put this in the agenda? You said there's be some more stuff to talk about.
Sure.
I mean, no pressure. Just move on to get to the rest of them. We talked about read layers. So there's just more feedback there. Combine and organize metadata file locations. I think this was Jesse, is that right?
Yeah, I think Jesse's taking this over. He's on PTO for the next few weeks. So
Does it need a new owner then to get it moved forward?
I left some comments because I feel like we're implicitly changing the build pack contract as well in terms of how we supply values to a build pack. And I feel like we should call that out explicitly. But overall, I feel like this is in pretty good shape, but we just need to explicitly add the build pack contract changes.
Sounds good.
does someone want to take that over, or are we just gonna wait for Jesse to get back? I think was kind of what Steven was hinting at, right?
Yeah, either way, I'm just wondering if this is high priority for anybody, or if it's, some of the changes are blocking other things because it's like invasive. Well, we'll see if anybody volunteers. All right, I think that's everything. So next thing on the list, I put just as a note, there's a CNCF secure supply chain working group meeting this morning at, I forget what time, Sam,
Right after this.
right after this at 11 Eastern. So Sam and I and Matt McNew are going to be presenting there just around how Buildpacks contribute to secure supply chain. Please show up if you are interested in seeing that, learning more. I think it'll be recorded too, probably.
Where can we find the link?
That's a good question. I think it's on the CNCF Secure Supply Chain Working Group.
It's on the CNCF calendar as well. You can find it here.
I'm gonna put it in the doc, maybe. Oh, thank you. And next on the list is, Docker file RFC.
Could I
So,
make a quick, sorry, Stephen, could I just make a quick comment before we dive into topics? Since we just completed the RFC roundup and we're talking about moving that part of the meeting to Wednesdays, to the Wednesday core team sync. If we could just, the talk about having a structured agenda for this meeting, as you were speaking and people were saying, oh, this is the thing that I need from everybody else. Like, if we had that information ahead of time, I think I could come to this meeting more prepared to actually contribute instead of just adding a note to my to-do list that will be ignored until next week. So all of this is a very long way of saying, if we're actually planning on making these changes to our agenda, let's all of us participants in the working group plan on checking the outcome of next week's core team subsync RFC roundup. That's all.
that definitely makes sense. So that means after the core team sub team sync, where people should take information about the RFCs we kind of did a check-in over, and then make sure it gets on this agenda for people to talk about. Awesome. I did notice it was empty today, so it'd definitely be good to start with an agenda there. All right, so moving over to the Docker file RFC. So I made a bunch of updates. This actually looks quite different than it did yesterday. Let me share my screen again. So some feedback I received. I think a big part of the feedback here was that just supporting app specified Docker files, even though it solves a problem for like Ruby and Node apps that require native extensions, where Buildpack wouldn't, like the package requirements are really coming from the app. The Buildpack wouldn't be able to tell, oh, this Ruby app needs this image magic C library. Maybe a Buildpack could do that for some small number of native extensions, but not all of every Node module in the world or every Ruby app in the world. So while it kind of solves a problem for those cases, there's still use cases that people care a lot about that involve packages getting installed based on the app source during the build process. And so the updates I made were an attempt to provide that functionality without adding any complexity to the Buildpack API at all. So let Buildpacks do what Buildpacks do best, have them function at the application layer, and then provide kind of a separate piece that is responsible for stack customization. The way this works is, so I removed the apps. Let me go to the readable version, it'll be easier. I removed the app specified Docker files feature entirely, but the builder specified Docker files implement the same feature with the same UX if you want it to. And it provides a way for platforms to control whether app specified Docker files work. So the idea is I just introduced a single directory in the builder, cnb hooks.d. This is like a place where you can have executables that are in this format. The only accepted format to start would be Dockerfile. And so like an example would be cnb hooks, and then this one is called app, and then this hook affects the build image and it outputs a Docker file. This one is, affects a run image and outputs a Docker file. In this example, this actually implements app specified Docker files. So these hooks run in the context of the app directory. And so this just reads build.dockerfile and run.dockerfile from the app directory and provides it back out. And so adding these hooks to the builder let app developers provide Docker files for the build image and the run image.
Hey, all right, could I get some clarification on that piece real quick? You said it produces a Docker file. Do you mean it produces the image from that Docker file context?
No.
Okay, so now I'm confused.
Literally produces a Docker file. So these hooks are hooks that don't modify the image. When you run them in the context of the app directory, they live on the builder. When you run them, with app directory as the current working directory, they output a Docker file. In the future, they could output LLB JSON instead. I left it so there's like this format field. So if we wanted to, it's like, no, generating a Docker file is not the nicest thing in the world. Some people might want to do more complex things. Basically, the previous proposal was you have a run.docker file and a build.docker file in your app directory. This is let a builder implement a run.docker file and a build.docker file in the app directory, but also let a builder implement, this hook could look at the app directory, right, and output Docker files that are specific to the application if they wanted to.
Interesting. Okay, so it's the format is not the file extension. Essentially, it's the output format.
Right.
Okay, that's a little confusing, but I can't think of alternatives right now.
Yeah, I'm not super attached to it. I figured straw man, whatever, people can complain about the bike shed stuff. I'm very happy.
Does that mean different builders could have different conventions for how they read the Docker file and the name of it, and the location of it?
For the app specified Docker files, yes, it does. Yeah. And so we could specify that somewhere else, that if you have Docker files in your app directory, this is how you do it. But I couldn't figure out a way to not implement two things, to let app developers, specify Docker files, and to be able to turn it off easily, and to let people who make builders create builders that could have a little more be able to dynamically install RPMs, for instance, was the big ask, from the Red Hat folks.
Does this require shell to be put in the builder?
It does not. So this is an example where it would have a shell, but these can be executables that are binary executables. They don't have to be scripts. They're not sourced. They're executed.
What is the order of operations? Is it like file-based or file name-based, similar to other Linux conventions?
I think it says, yeah, lexicographical order, but I forget. I might have forgot. Somewhere in here, I think it says this. But yes, alphabetical order.
Okay.
That's missing here. I will add it. So the platform specified Docker file stays the same, right? I updated these examples to make more sense. So like, this is still the same app specified Docker file, but it assumes that the app Docker file hook is present.
And this all happens before regular detection?
Yep, this happens before the Buildpack API runs. I
In
don't
a
know
sense, these are like stack packs, but the interface is create a Docker file and they run first. They're like Docker file packs.
They're not integrated into the detection API. There's none of the complexity of
Yeah,
that stuff.
it does keep things a lot simpler.
I think Charles had a couple of questions around so this would be the first time we are bundling something in the builder that's not a lifecycle or a build pack. How would you actually put them there? Like, would you put them on the stack image or?
Builder toml was my thought. I should put an example of builder toml in here too.
Would it make sense to have Buildpacks define this, or do you want it to be on the stack or builder level just to avoid complexities around different operating systems?
I think to avoid complexities around different operating systems, I think is motivation. The other thing I'm very worried about is if a build pack can specify the Docker file hooks, then as soon as any popular build pack specifies Docker files that install OS packages, they break rebasing for every app that uses it. There's like no, we can't do rebasing and operating system package installation together. And so I'm concerned about adding a feature in the Buildpack API that provides functionality that removes most of the features of the Buildpack API, if that makes sense. That removes the kind of key, security feature of the Buildpack API, at least. So the idea is that these would be separate. They'd be more attached to the builder itself than to Buildpacks. Although you could imagine, like I thought about maybe some interactions could be allowed, like because these hooks run in the context of the builder, right? They could have access to the Buildpacks. And so there could be, some builders could support reading information from the Buildpacks to install operating system packages. I kind of don't like that because then there's creates special Buildpacks that work on some builders and not other builders, which I think is better than the operating system package installation thing, but it's also kind of, then it's, I don't know.
Because the way you currently have the hook reading from the app directory, I can totally imagine a stack or a builder that defines to read Docker files from the build pack directory under /cnb/whatever.
Yeah, but then it'd have to know the name of the specific build pack, be a hook that's coupled to, I guess it could like loop through all the build packs
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that, but I don't think it really improves anything.
Is it possible that this could actually happen after detect, such that you could? I haven't really thought through this, such that you could have a different hook per group. So if you detected the Java group, for example, you might do one thing, and if you detected a Python group, loosely a Python group, you might do a different thing. I'm not actually sure if that's advantageous. I'm just curious if you thought through that.
So the run Docker file is applied after detection. So like Emily said earlier, these would happen before detection. The hooks run before detection, but the run Docker file happens after detection because of dynamic run image selection. If dynamic run image selection is implemented, that's when it would need to apply. And so that gives you some control over the base set of packages that are used at runtime. If I guess the question is, would you want to generate a different, like dynamically generate a different Docker file based on the output of detect? Because I feel like it's starting to couple to the Buildpack API again.
Yeah. No, again, I haven't thought through it, but my first thought was like, that might be a way to take advantage of things like detect without actually having the stack pack detect kind of mechanism. But I could imagine like a Python app having very different conventions or needs for doing this than like a Java app or a Go app. Yeah, I don't know. I'll read the RFC and think through it.
Makes sense. I think the way I did an example of that. That was a little slow.
I mean, it may be that if it's app specified, it really doesn't matter, because then you're just specifying as an app developer, you're just specifying whatever you need. So it may not make sense. But I could definitely see like not wanting to support that for a Java app or something, and then but supporting it for Python.
Makes sense. The way I gave an example, it's kind of like that. It doesn't read the output of detect. It just uses the app directory to determine the thing directly. If that makes sense. So you could still do that, right?
Oh, so it can do its own. Yeah, it can do its own shape detection.
Right. It's separate from the Buildpack API entirely. Which I think is probably simpler for end users as opposed to tying build plan mechanism.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that some of the feedback that I was most interested in from Charles here, I think he had just had some questions about the notation and things like that, but there was a good question about rebasing. So like, what will the workaround as rebasing is a key feature? I just don't think it's possible. I think there's, that's probably something to chat about with Charles, but you can't install operating system packages and then rebase out from under them. So
arbitrary packages, yeah. Right.
I feel like the only way to do it would be to start with your new base image, have saved off your run Docker files, rerun them. It's still not safe, but it's safer than rebasing out from under the changes from the Docker files. Like if you trust your the Docker file author.
Because the installing operating system packages is pretty slow, like, and you still need to build container and all of that, I kind of now feel like there's no advantage to that combination. It's kind of like worst of both worlds. Your app, it doesn't
You might as well just rebuild at that point.
We have layer caching. That means that technically nothing has to happen during the build process. I no longer believe we should try to create an API that requires a rebase that is not a rebase. So,
Yeah, agree.
Cool. Any other questions?
Are there ways to like share hooks so we could standardize some of this stuff? That seems common among platforms.
You can put them
or
on the
builders.
registry. Right. Yeah, we could put them on the registry, and then you could reference them in Builder TOML by registry locations if you wanted to. Like, you could really, create a repository there. But I kind of feel like we want to encourage people to use the Buildpack API as much as possible, right? Hooks are like a, way to add app developer features, way to add kind of stack level features that let you, sacrifice a little bit of performance for having more tuned app specific base images. Not a tool for Buildpack authors to circumvent the Buildpack API, essentially, is kind of the reason for keeping them separate. So like, they're an escape hatch. I feel like putting them on the registry, making them really accessible is maybe working against the goal.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't like putting them in the registry, because then we should really be talking about a Buildpack like mechanism to do this, and then we're talking about stack packs.
Exactly.
So I definitely, we should make this easy, but yeah, again, I mean, I'm even a little leery about introducing a hook concept, like as long as it's very internal, but like we should try not to introduce some new construct that people have to learn about in order to do this. But we should make them like the sort of base case accessible. I think definitely speccing whatever convention we decide on for build.dockerfile or whatever, and potentially making that default in pack or something like that.
To me, I imagine like pack create builder could, take, like, I think this makes the builder important, right? You could imagine an interface for pack create builder where there's a flag you pass to add that app specified Dockerfile hook automatically. Then the project could provide that hook, right? Those executables. The pack create builder could also take the Docker files directly, so you don't have to run create stack on them first, right? It could just be a one-stop command for creating a builder for a bunch of different languages together. That would kind of encapsulate that interface. And then it's no longer like hooks aren't a feature that an app developer would use, because they already have, if they're supposed to, they already have app specified Docker files they can use to make those configuration changes. And then if you're a kind of platform level, like what Charles and Ozzy are talking about with installing RPMs and those things, then this gives you that functionality at the builder level if you really need it, at the cost of you can't rebase anymore. So it's definitely not Buildpacks providing operating system packages. If that makes sense. There's something that is between that and app specified Docker files.
I had a question about multiple hooks and how the final Docker file would look like. So if there are multiple hooks running, what kind of instructions can they provide there? Like,
they run in succession, creating intermediary images. They don't get it together.
So for each Docker file that each hook outputs, we run the thing and then pass the output image as the base image to the next hook's output image.
That's why the base image is configurable as a build arc. Yeah, because we need to be able to string them together. But it shouldn't be any slower than having a longer Docker file, because Docker files already create intermediary images usually.
Does that mean each hook has to include that from base image thing as a default?
Right.
Like each Docker file that they output has like a from base image.
Yeah, each Docker file has to be in this format. Let's start like this.
And each hook also has to run that gen packages stuff then?
No. The gem packages stuff is just for when you create a stack initially. That's the only time when you have to think about gen packages. And there can be a flag to create stack that automatically adds gen packages. It can be a no-op. It's only relevant for the first person who's creating a stack. We can make it really easy to do in that case, even the no-op version. Then this will get run automatically by the lifecycle after all the Docker files are applied in order to parse the package DB and create a cyclone DX SBOM that's also used for matching against Buildpacks. So it's important, still an important part of the API. So Buildpacks can use Perl URLs for dynamic run image selection, for build image matching packages for the build image. Build pack.
What happens if a hook removes the hook directory in one of its like I'm just talking about random edge cases, but I can imagine if it's a free for all, it can just modify the other hooks as well, right?
Correct.
Or it can add them in during dynamically.
It could also, replace the whole builder with a different thing. Yeah, they're on your own. This is also why it's really not build pack provided. It's very much because of the power, right? It's very much, close to the person who's providing the stack or the image itself that's doing the build. It's again, like my model for this is basically, what if you could run on build instructions in your stack creating Docker files so that when you do a build, it executes the on build, instructions, except on build is deprecated and we have, multiple sets of Docker files. So instead of using the on build API, just make them new Docker files that run on build. That makes sense.
Okay. Does this mean it can also dynamically change the build user or whatever? Like if it changes the envars or?
Yes, it can do anything. It could from, it could do a multi-stage Docker file and blow away the entire original thing and replace it with a completely different image, as long as it accepts the arg. It could accept the arg and then do from something else if it wanted to. No restrictions. You're responsible for maintaining the Buildpack API when you use the feature. Although, it'll validate, the lifecycle validate that it's a valid stack image before starting. So you might not get very far if you start doing crazy things.
I think it would be nice to have examples of like these hooks generating Docker files and how they're chained together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did do some things here, but I can add more. Any other questions? All right. We will move on to the next item in the agenda. If I can find the agenda. There we go. SBOM RC.
Let me share my screen. So I think the only changes I made was like an example of how to take an existing bomb and convert it to the Cyclone DX version for it. I don't know if what kind of backwards compatibility you expect in terms of the existing label that's put out there, and like how platforms interpret it. So the backwards compatibility I have here would ensure that whatever data that Buildpacks output is preserved, but the structure of what they output in the final image would be very different than what a platform currently expects. So that was like the only open question I had. Like this would preserve the data, but the output format would be completely different. Is that backwards compatible enough, or are we expecting it to even like put the existing labels and existing files that the platform expects and put these things in separate places?
I think this merged format is really good for the new platform API. I don't think if someone's using an old platform API, we can totally break the format because people might be relying on it. So we might have to do something in the other direction for older platform APIs, like take the Cyclone DX stuff and stuff it all in our existing metadata. Like it's a little bit weird, but I think we've guaranteed this schema exists and people have integrations against it. So I don't think we can radically break it for an older API.
Yeah. So would you want me to also define what this would look like the other way around? So like if you take Cyclone DX and stuff it in the existing format, what it looks like?
Yeah, I think with those two, we'll be good to go. And then hopefully everyone can upgrade and eventually we can kill all these old APIs and never worry about this again.
I think because for the latter, I might just like, like it depends on how readable we want the Cyclone DX form to be. I could just like base64 encode it and put it in a metadata key which says metadata.cyclone DX bomb and shove the whole thing there. But I don't know what expectations we have on backwards compatibility. I mean, I don't even know if this is backwards compatibility or forwards compatibility, but like what expectations we have on that side.
I mean, I think that, yeah. Like you could do what you're doing here, at least with the name and version fields could still exist. Like at least name is something maybe we could extract from the components and make different entries for, like make one bomb for each component we find in the Cyclone DX or something like that.
Yeah, I guess we could. We could also just put the entire thing inside the metadata table, like just take the entire Cyclone DX JSON, shove it inside metadata, put the top name as Cyclone DX bomb, and be done with it. It would preserve everything. Does that work? Or would you want it for each?
I have to think about it, but I think I'm fine with whatever hand wavy version of this gets us to a world where we can move forward. This is not like, I think the existing bomb, given the looseness of its schema, is not super useful to people. So I'm not super worried about translating in a way that it continues to be useful, because I think it's already sort of not useful, but I just don't want things to straight up break. That is my only concern.
I also don't know if we have like automated integrations that read this bomb, or whether it's like some human reading it, in which case we can just put everything under metadata and it would still be readable and fine.
I think there are some automated integrations that parse this bomb that exist in the world. But it's already a little risky because any build pack can just change however it's structuring the data under metadata anyways. There isn't a lot you can do with it other than sort of like list the entries, or if you know you're using a specific build pack, pull out a specific data, right? Yep. But that will still continue to work until the build pack upgrades, and then that was always what was going to happen if the build pack changes its format. So I think as long as we're not putting something in the old format that if someone was trying to automatically parse it, they'd get like a parsing error because it's not the same format. Like that is my requirement here.
Yeah. As long as we have arbitrary stuff under metadata, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll update it from the other side, but I think we should be able to get by with this without making any breaking changes.
Looks like our facilitator left us. But that was the end of our agenda for the day. Do we want to wrap up a couple minutes early?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Have a good one, everybody.